Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. It's so good to see so many familiar faces, or I guess at least names on the screen again. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kirsten Carr. I'm the Director of Planning and Sustainability here at MORPC, and I want to thank you today for joining us for this webinar. Just a quick reminder, we will be recording today's presentation. So anyways, as we move into this new year, we don't want to get stale on any progress, but kind of keep the energy going. And so we thought it would be helpful to share with you all what has happened since the release of the Regional Housing Strategy last September. And honestly, in a season of so much change, we're really encouraged to see so many Central Ohio communities working hard to make sure that housing remains a priority. We've been busy over the last several months sharing the results of the Regional Housing Strategy with many of you and your community members and organizations. But more than that, we've also used that time to listen to our project sponsors and local government members, to our partners and advisors and our community leaders. We really wanted to hear your thoughts on the Regional Housing Strategy, the process and the outcomes, whether and how you envision implementing the housing actions in your work, and how MORPC can best support you and truly be a good partner in this. So we've taken your feedback really seriously. It's really informed our process and guided us toward our next steps for the Regional Housing Strategy. And so today we want to share with you some of the things that we've heard in those conversations and show you how we are responding with a preview on what's come for the Regional Housing Strategy this year. And spoiler alert, you'll also be the first to see the new housing dashboard here just in a few minutes, which you know is a really important part of MORPC's ongoing commitment to the priority actions and other goals of the Regional Housing Strategy. Just a quick reminder, I know all of you are familiar with those 5 priority actions that emerged from the process last year, but they were really important to us by giving us directive on what we needed to start first of those over 100 potential action items. That's not to say we have 100% agreement on these 5 actions. In fact, we know there are other priorities within this group and across the region. But that's why we believe it's so important to continue the dialogue and engage this group and others in Central Ohio on the Regional Housing Strategy. There are obviously a lot of different opportunities to ensure and improve housing supply, affordability, and equity, and we all have a role to play. If you recall, these priority action items were intended to address one of the 5 core housing issues that our region faces. These are the critical challenges so many Central Ohio residents experience every day as they work to attain decent quality housing. And as we all know, these challenges have only been made worse by the health and economic crises caused by COVID-19. I just want to go over these 5 really briefly, and then I'll share some of the common themes we've heard in our outreach just most recently. But with those 5 core housing issues, Green Tape Development Review is really intended to address the increased competition for homes in the sense of, we want to remove or lower regulatory barriers to development. And we've had quite a few discussions around that. Enacting source of income protection laws, or otherwise expand fair housing laws, addresses the barriers limiting access to homes. I want to thank Bexley and Festival for already passing these protection laws, and Columbus and Reynoldsburg and so many others really working on getting some of those passed as well. Third, the creation of a state housing tax credit would help to address the limited supply of homes priced for low-income households. This is obviously something that we can't do alone here in this region, but we need statewide support, and we're working on that. Creation of a pilot program that supports development of diverse, lower-cost housing products can address the demand for more homes to serve our growing and increasingly diverse region. And as we're thinking about more development, we really need to be thoughtful about how we develop our communities, because we don't want to just plop housing down, but we want to make sure that housing is placed in locations with access to transit and job centers and other important community amenities. And so that conversation of creating true neighborhoods and livable communities is really, really critical in the larger scheme of the housing discussion. And then finally, more tenant-based rental assistance is needed to address housing instability, which has become even more important as the threat of evictions has grown over the past year. with people losing their jobs or having to work reduced hours. So during our conversations with many of you and your peers, here are some of the common threats that we heard in terms of what are the most pressing challenges. And by all means, those are not the only things we heard, but those were issues that came up more frequently than others. So the first one was brought up during the regional housing strategy many times and has honestly been a concern for a while, but it seems that residents are increasingly opposed to any and all development proposals. They cite concerns with parking and traffic, school overcrowding, and community character. And I think they're especially concerned when you mention terms such as density or multifamily or affordable housing. So how can we do a better job educating the general public on the importance of infill and redevelopment and really make them understand how density can really benefit all of them by bringing in more transportation options, more amenities, mixed use, all of that. I know that there's a new group that has been formed called Neighbors for More Neighbors Columbus. They are hoping to push back against the NIMBY arguments. It's growing pretty fast, which is great. So it'll be interesting to see how they can help with the NIMBYism concern, and maybe in one of our future speaker series or peer learning events, we can actually bring that group in to talk a little bit more of what they're doing and hoping to achieve. The second thing we heard is that communities don't want a traditional off-the-shelf model when it comes to homes, but are really looking more for products that really consider the neighborhood and its character. And at the same time, when we're talking to the development community, they feel there's a lack of innovation and in land use and zoning codes. So they feel more, timid, I guess, so to speak, for in terms of proposing a completely new product. So here the question really becomes, how can we spur more innovative development on all fronts to, one, address maybe house affordability, but also the speed of development, and really thinking about how can development really fit into the character of a community and not be just cookie cutter. When discussing next steps in terms of creating a local housing action agenda, there are quite a few communities that have recognized the need to involve the school districts, especially since school district boundaries do not align with jurisdictional boundaries. It really creates challenges for planning and for land use decisions and for developments. And you've probably heard it in the news and even know it on your own within the work that you're doing, that schools are beginning to be seriously concerned about certain development as well, and are pushing back because they are worried about the capacity it brings to them or how it might overwhelm their school system. At the same time, we also heard from superintendents that they have that housing instability is a big concern in terms of high student turnover rate. So we really need to make sure that we engage them into these conversations, and we have some plans bringing them in on some of the platforms for our speaker series. But it's exciting to see how many communities are interested in bringing them into the larger planning effort for them. And then finally, we also heard that inspiration is key. So how can we learn from others here in the region, or what can we learn from other regions across the country? And Jennifer will talk a little bit more about this, but this forum today is kind of kickoff for that peer learning. So at MORPC, we've taken the feedback you've given us to really seriously and used it to consider, how can we best support our members moving forward? We know that we too have to do our part to ensure Central Ohio becomes a more equitable and attainable region. And MORPC will continue to be champions for this work, and we will provide support, technical assistance, and also ongoing education information wherever possible and what's appropriate. Specifically when it comes to implementing the 5 priority actions and honestly, any of the 100+ potential actions, MORPC's strength really lies in its ability to bring people together. We know that this is a role we will continue to play as we work towards implementation. Through conversations like the one today or the ones that we've been having, we really hope to be able to share information, provide resources that you can then also use in your work. We know that we will continue to be champions specifically for green tape development review processes in our communities. We are continuing to learn from our members and our partners in the development community about what this would look like and how we could make it happen in Central Ohio. We have some ideas on how to further these conversations. BIA and their membership has been really, really helpful in thinking this through as well, and how can we create a very productive dialogue between the local governments and the development community here in the next few months. There are several ways we can help to facilitate your work on the priority action items. Obviously, I talked about source of income protection. We are thinking, how can we provide resources and examples for communities eager to adopt those type of protections? So can we utilize our website to put templates and existing laws and legislations up there so you can use them to write your own? We're also coordinating with our peers across the state to advocate for the creation of a state housing tax credit program, so we can really increase the amount of financing available for more development. And then we are collaborating with CODA and Columbus and all of our other members who are involved in the LINKUS initiative, which is the High Capacity Transit Corridor Initiative, and thinking about that might be a great place for testing out new innovative design opportunities as they are thinking about redeveloping these these corridors, and especially around the transit stops, to make sure that they are mixed use and mixed income as well. And then finally, we want to continue to be supportive partners on the actions that may be outside our direct scope of services. But if you have ideas of how we can help more on any of those and any of the initiatives, please let us know. And I think I mentioned before, Jennifer later in this webinar will tell you of some more specific actions that we are thinking would be supportive to all of you. But with that, before we would discuss what's next for the regional housing strategy, we also want to recognize another function at MORPC, which is our role as a regional data resource. So as you know, at MORPC, we track the region's progress toward a number of goals related to sustainability and transportation and air quality, because knowing where we've been helps us to prepare to where we're going. And so likewise, it's necessary to track the region's progress towards addressing our core housing issues. And our team has been hard at work since September on the creation of a regional housing dashboard that will allow us to do just that. And so to tell you more about this and to really kick off this new dashboard, I'm going to turn it over now to our amazing data and mapping team led by Aaron Schill in this villain. Aaron, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks, Kirsten. Apologies for noise in the background. The housing market on the rehab side is going strong next door, so you may hear some nail guns going. They've been started about 7 a.m. today. I'm going to give just a very brief overview of the metrics dashboard and then turn it over to Liz to give you all the first glimpse at the public demo of what that looks like and to walk you through the metrics themselves. So just by way of a little bit of background, the metrics that we developed are informed by the data analysis, that very robust data analysis that was done as part of the regional housing strategy. And the metrics, one of our goals was to span all 5 of the core issues that Kirsten reminded us all of just a moment ago. But we distilled all of that research down to 4 key metrics that we want to track as a region. And those address the areas of housing instability, balance in the market, in the market rate side of housing, supply and demand in the subsidized housing market, and racial equity in our housing market. So these are intended to serve as consistent data points that reflect our progress as a region in addressing our overall housing issues. One of the key things that we were looking for is for these metrics to be from reliable data sources that are available at a regional scale and that we know that we can consistently track over time. So this is going to allow us to do some historical benchmarking and see where we have been, in addition to a certainty that the data will continue to be available so that we know that we'll be able to track where we're going and our progress for years to come. You may hear 4 metrics and think that's not much, and there's a lot of things to be thinking about. We recognize that there's a great deal of complexity with many specific issues and strategies to consider, and it would really be impossible for us to track all of the incredible work being done by communities and other partners, even if we had significantly more metrics. But the metrics you'll see that Liz will show you here in a moment, they track overall trends for the region, and positive movement in these 4 metrics we think will do a good job of capturing movement made on smaller, more detailed issues, more nuanced issues. And we know that movement on these overall metrics are going to reflect the strategies that are put in place by communities and by partners, including those that are coming out of the RHS and the local housing action agendas, in addition to those that are already underway. I also want to mention 2 things that you won't see yet. These are works in progress, and you'll see them rolled out soon. And one of that is benchmarks and targets. So you won't see benchmarks set yet, and you won't see targets for where we're trying to go for these metrics quite yet. And you also won't see community-specific metrics. So we're looking at those being a part of the local housing action agendas and how we can incorporate some more community-specific measures. But for now, this metrics dashboard is really creating some consensus and consistency for this kind of concise number of data points that we can be tracking over time as a region, and all work together to make some progress. So with that, I will turn it over to Liz to unveil the new dashboard.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks, Kirsten. I'm looking forward to sharing this with you all this morning. I'm going to start with just some really basic nuts and bolts, and then we'll dig into each of the metrics specifically and talk a little bit more about our thinking that went into these metrics, some conversations we've had with partners to help us get where we are currently, and also talk through sort of the relevance or meaning of each of the metrics as we think about these going forward. So just again, really quick with some orientation to navigate to the metrics dashboard, you'll go to our regional housing strategy website at marpc.org/RHS, and in our navigation menu, you'll now find a link to the new metrics dashboard here toward the top. And then once you click on that, you can navigate directly to the dashboard here. I'm gonna scroll down here and just give you a little walkthrough to what you'll find in the dashboard itself. On each of the metrics, you'll see just kind of an overall headline that gives you a sense of the general directionality that we hope to see as kind of a positive direction to head for each of the metrics. You'll also see a data spotlight, which gives you a picture, a snapshot in time of where we are currently, and then you'll see a trend chart of some kind that will tell you a little bit more about where we've been. For those of you who might be new to Tableau dashboards, there's also functionality down at the bottom that allows you to view it in full screen. You can also download an image of the dashboard, and you can also download some of the underlying data from the dashboard as well by selecting this little down arrow download button here. Finally, we've got a couple of spots where we wanted to provide more information, but we didn't have a lot of space, and we wanted to make sure the message was really impactful. But if you do hover over the question mark to the left of the headline, you'll get a little more detailed information about the metric itself. And if you hover over the question mark at the lower right corner of the dashboard, you'll get some details about the data sources that feed into the measures that you see. And then very lastly, we've got our navigation menu here to the right. All right, so now that we're through a quick orientation, let me walk you through each of the metrics. So to start, we've got housing stability, which we know from what Kirsten just shared as a reminder that the analysis completed in the regional housing strategy, which you'll find in more detail in our existing conditions summary report. We know that housing instability was identified as one of the core issues with housing in Central Ohio. And we also know that this is a direct consequence of one of the other core issues that were highlighted, that there just aren't enough units available for low and moderate income residents in the region. Now, housing instability can manifest in a lot of different ways, and some of those we could track in more detail, so things like eviction and overcrowded housing and foreclosure. But for this metric, we wanted to show that we're making progress on actions that reduce that housing instability, and especially that we're achieving that by producing more housing at more price points to serve the diverse needs of Central Ohioans. So we selected cost burden as a way to track that as sort of an umbrella. If we're successful, we should start to see a decline in households spending too much of their income on housing. And as a result, if fewer households are spending too much of their income on housing, we should see fewer adverse housing outcomes among Central Ohioans. Things like what I mentioned earlier, evictions and foreclosures should decrease. For this metric, we focus in on households that are earning roughly below the regional average income, which is why you'll only find data on this metric for cost burden households earning less than $75,000 a year. On the dashboard, you can see on the trend chart what the past trend looks like for both renters and owners. And also, if you filter by income range, you can see how households are impacted if you go down to those earning less than $50,000 and those earning less than $30,000 annually. Now you can see in the chart that we have the percentage of households experiencing cost burden for both owners and renters at different income ranges. But if you hover over any of the points, you can also see an estimated number of households having an experience of spending too much, more than 30% of their incomes on housing costs. All right, so moving on to the next metric, balanced market. So we also know from the work of our partners in the region, also reinforced by the work of the regional housing strategy, that we've not been producing enough new housing to keep up with our growing population. We know from Economics 101 that when there's a shortage of available supply, prices are driven up. Either too much or not enough supply can have negative impacts on the market. Too much housing drives prices low, and that can be a deterrent to investment, and too little housing drives prices high, which makes it very difficult for residents to find housing while also reducing the supply of naturally occurring affordable housing in the market. So for this metric, we wanted an indicator that would tell us whether the market is more or less in equilibrium. So are we doing a good job as a region producing and maintaining enough housing to keep some balance between supply and demand? So if we're successful, we should see fewer dramatic swings in the indicators that are shown here. So for rental product, the rental vacancy rate, so this green line, tells us that whether there are enough available units on the rental market for people who are looking to move. And for homeowner product, the median number of days on the market for homes for sale, it tells us more about the balance in the homeowner market. So there aren't good, hard, and fast rules for what a balanced range for these indicators ought to be, especially because every market is a little bit different. But we'll continue working with our partners, as Erin mentioned earlier, to think about what the right target range to aim for is for this and the other metrics that I'm going to share with you today. All right, so subsidized housing. So if we consider the last one that I just shared with you, even if the market were in perfect balance, we know that the market alone can't meet the housing needs of all residents. There will always be residents who have a ceiling on what they're able to earn, and there simply aren't enough decent housing options for those households with the most limited budgets. Subsidized housing, of course, plays a critical role for those low-income households. We wanted a metric that would allow us to see the relationship between the supply and demand for subsidized housing. The supply is pretty straightforward. You'll see a trend line that tracks most of the project-based units and vouchers available in the region over time. But demand is a little more challenging to track directly. We spoke with several of our partners and ultimately determined that there aren't good, consistently available ways to measure the number of households who are actively seeking subsidized housing. So we landed on using a proxy, so households with incomes below the federal poverty level, as a way to represent the potential universe of subsidized housing seekers. We'll continue to work with our partners on this metric, along with the others, to identify a target to work toward as we aim to increase the available supply of subsidized housing in the region. And finally, and I find this one to be the most compelling of all, We know, of course, that the housing experience in Central Ohio is not the same for all residents. While housing inequity is the sad reality across several groups in Central Ohio, we know that it's probably the most stark for the region's Black residents. One strong data resource we have access to is a comprehensive list of every mortgage application with detailed information about the applicant's race and ethnicity. While it doesn't show us all the ways that non-white and especially Black residents have more structural barriers to accessing housing, it's a compelling part of the story. We wanted a metric that would tell us whether the region is moving toward eliminating racism as a source of housing disparity. This chart shows home mortgage loan denial rates by race and ethnicity relative to the overall denial rate each year. By selecting different applicant income ranges, which I'll go ahead and select one on the higher end of the range, we can see that there are disparities in home lending, especially for Black residents that are present at all income levels of applicants. For this metric, the target is clear. As a region, we need to work toward eliminating the home lending gap and other causes of housing inequity especially related to race. So finally, this dashboard, as Aaron mentioned earlier, is kind of a first iteration release. The things that he mentioned earlier around benchmarking and setting targets will be next steps going forward. We also plan to continue building onto this resource to help to reinforce the importance of making progress on each of these metrics to help with our education and informing roles in the regional housing strategy, while also drawing connections to other elements of the regional housing strategy, like the actions provided in the implementers toolkit. That's all I have. I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Kirsten.
Thank you, Liz. And I just wanted to let you know that there was a question in the chat that says, will this information be available by zip codes? Aaron answered it and said the dashboard is focused on tracking the regional scale metrics, but we'll be working with individual communities and counties to consider more geographically specific measures. And then the answer to that was the question was raised because Franklin County is looking at how they will be utilizing their latest CARES Act funding for eviction and rental assistance. And so I think Aaron or Liz, do you guys want to add a little bit more about how communities could get that individual data if they needed it for grant applications?
Yeah, we'll be happy. We do have that data at more granular levels, and for a particular need like that, we'll be happy to talk about how we can get you that or help to support that application. We want to, for the purpose of the regional housing strategy, we want to start with our focus at this regional scale and think about how do we move these needles on these kind of four really important broad metrics as an entire region. But as Liz mentioned, this is the first iteration. We will be thinking about, and frankly already have in our backlog, some additional functionality we would like to include. So we'll be thinking about how to, over time, improve the dashboard based on feedback we get. We'll probably look at a version 2 release later this year. So we'll be taking feedback on how to tweak the existing metrics, particularly that one around subsidized housing, and thinking about things like geographic focus as well. So we really welcome your feedback. I would love to hear from you. And in the meantime, if there are specific data questions you have, let us know, and we'll be happy to work with you offline on those.
Thank you, Aaron. Do you guys have any other questions or immediate feedback on the dashboard? You can either share them with us in the chat function or just turn on your camera or microphone. I did put the link to the dashboard in the chat as well, but as Liz mentioned, it's embedded within our general regional housing strategy website, morpc.org/RHS. So you can go there and play around, and Aaron and Liz, Jennifer, I will be happy to take any individual comments after you had a time to kind of digest it more and play around with it. And even if some questions come up after today or even during the rest of this presentation, please feel free to still put them in the chat and we can come back to that. Yes, Tom.
just again, kudos to MORPC for putting this up. It's going to be very helpful, I think. And if it can be more granular, as Aaron was indicating, by community, that would be helpful for us, I think, just as a community. But yeah, it looks good.
Thank you, Tom. Absolutely. All right, if there are no other questions or comments, Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Kirsten, and bear with me as I bring up some more PowerPoint slides for our presentation here. We're really excited to be able to share with you what's coming down the pike this year for the regional housing strategy. And as Kirsten mentioned earlier today already, your feedback really helped us to better understand what kinds of tools and resources and information you really need from MORPC in order to address the region's housing challenges. So you've already seen the 4 key ways that we believe MORPC can be most supportive of the priority actions by providing education and information, serving as a champion for green tape development review, facilitating progress towards source of income protections, the creation of a state housing tax credit, and innovative design ideas, and by delegating and acting as supportive partners on rental assistance programs. We are using the same framework to introduce or align several other programs that will further strengthen our commitment to the regional housing strategy. Some of these we're already doing, and some of these are new programs that are in direct response to the feedback that you've given us. So when it comes to education, MORPC will continue to provide ways to learn about housing needs and solutions, and that housing metrics dashboard is really one important part of that work. We're also aiming to provide information you can use in your conversations with your constituents and stakeholders. Examples of policy, processes, programs, things that could be implemented or replicated here in Central Ohio. Many of these are going to be available on the Regional Housing Strategy Resource Hub, which is a new feature on the website that we're going to be bringing online next week. This is an initiative that we're going to be continuing to add content and materials to over time, so we really welcome your ideas on what kind of content you'd like to see on that resource. We're also excited to introduce 2 new programs, including the Housing Speaker Series and the Housing Peer Exchange. So we'll talk a little bit about both of those. The Regional Housing Strategy Speaker Series will bring together national thought leaders to talk about the challenges facing our communities with a real focus on innovative solutions. Thanks to the magic of virtual meetings these days, this is a program we're actually able to open up to our peer regional planning organizations nationwide. So we hope you'll join us along with communities and community leaders from across the country. Each session was really based on your input. So we've designed these around the topics that generated a lot of discussion over the past year, but these are topics that are not unique to Central Ohio. With a nationwide reach, we're excited to learn from other regions, but we're also excited to be able to share our region's successes. The first session takes place next month. We're going to be showcasing how the market is responding to current housing challenges with innovative ideas. You can register via Eventbrite, and we'll be sending out a link with details to join the meeting closer to time. So we have this national speaker series, but we also really wanted to bring it back to Central Ohio with a focus on peer learning and networking. And so we are going to be doing that through our peer exchange program. We look forward to working with you to develop the content for these sessions. And our goal is really to make real progress toward the solutions that will impact our region's housing challenges. The first of these events is scheduled for March 18th. We'll be following up with more details and an invitation very soon. We've said this before, we've already said it today, but there's a lot of good work that's already happening in this space across Central Ohio. We want to use our platform to champion and grow support for these efforts. For starters, I have to shout out to MORPC's incredible residential services team. They provide home weatherization, home repair services in our region, and their team, along with others like them, are really filling a critical need in our communities. And this is a need that only continues to grow every year. In addition, we really value our partnership with the real estate development community, and thanks to ULI, BIA, CMHA, the Affordable Housing Alliance, and others, we are continuing to learn how communities and developers can work together. So as champions of this work, we think we can shine a brighter light on these success stories with 2 new programs, a development roadshow and working toward a template for green tape development review processes. There are several successful developments right here in Central Ohio that have been made possible through some combination of strong partnerships, flexible codes and designs, creative financing or incentives, and more. The Development Roadshow will provide an opportunity for elected officials, appointed commission members, and staff to visit these sites and talk with the folks who help to make them happen. I will add that trying to plan an event like this in the middle of a health crisis does add some logistical wrenches, but we're working through those details and we're really hopeful that we can bring this program to you later this year. And feel free to send us ideas if there are stops you think we should include on the tour. From our conversations with you, we know there's a strong desire both within the development community and with local governments to make the development review process more efficient. Your candidness really helped us to get a better understanding of what the typical development review process looks like and where we might be able to find some efficiencies. One community that really impressed us throughout these conversations is the city of Reynoldsburg. We attempted to map out their process, which is what you see here, and I hope we did it justice. But Reynoldsburg has significantly updated its land use policies, including its development review process over the last couple of years. And I think it's important to call out that this kind of reform really does require a strong public engagement process up front, and we recognize that is no small effort. But we do think that the long-term efficiencies and the potential for return on investment can really be worth that effort. So as other communities begin similar processes, and we know several of you are interested in exploring that, know that we'll be ready to connect you with your peers who have already gone down that road, as well as resources and examples that can help you and support you in that effort. Many of the actions within the regional housing strategy will require leadership from our local governments, and we're already seeing that leadership in communities like Bexley, Columbus, Reynoldsburg, and Westerville. We know that many communities are interested in completing a local housing action agenda with your residents, and we're really happy to see that interest. This is something that MORPC is here to provide support for you on. The Housing Action Agenda process is really intended to be led by the community so that it results in an action agenda that is unique to your community. We recognize that you may want or need different information from us and different levels of support from us as you go through that process. So we're going to be offering what I like to call a cafeteria menu of options, various levels of MORPC assistance and support, and potentially even a task order consultant list for additional support. I think a big revelation for us as we had our conversations with you was just how many communities are interested in including the school district boundaries and the districts themselves in this process. We're very supportive of this approach, and so we're currently exploring how to meaningfully incorporate schools and their district boundaries into the existing process, and we're doing that with some help from our partners at Enterprise. We'll certainly keep you posted as this goes forward. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to create a process that can then be replicated by other communities who are interested in following that model. And of course, several of the actions within the housing strategy fall under the leadership of non-governmental organizations. These are actions that may be outside of MORPC's area of expertise, but know that we support this important work. For example, if you'd like to share a presentation of the housing strategy with your organization, we can provide speakers. We can also provide a copy of the presentation and talking points. We're also in the process of building out a speakers bureau so that we can maintain a list of folks from a variety of sectors who are able and willing to share their time and expertise speaking on housing related issues. If you're interested in being a part of the Speakers Bureau or you know someone who ought to be, please let us know. And I think it's really important that we hear from new voices in this process as well. We're particularly interested in elevating the stories and the lived experiences of Central Ohio residents. So again, if you know of someone who might be interested in sharing their story, please do let us know. So as you've seen today, the process of developing the regional housing strategy was really just a step. Now that we have a roadmap to guide us, it's really time for us to roll up our sleeves and start working together towards solutions. And you can count on MORPC to be a leader, a champion, and an ally in this work. And it looks like we have a little bit of time. We wanted to make sure that we did leave some time here before we close out so that if there are any questions or topics for discussion that we can do so. So I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Kirsten, who I think is monitoring our chat to see if there's any items for conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer. And yes, please, if you're interested in having a little bit of a dialogue, we definitely have 10 to 15 minutes still left. We can certainly always end a meeting early and no one's going to be upset about that either. But we'd love to hear from you. And if you have questions, now is the time. Or if any of our partners would like to share anything that they've been up to that would benefit the entire group to know of, that would be wonderful as well. Jennifer, we don't have any questions in the chat. The only request we had was that we would share this PowerPoint after the meeting, which is of course something we will do.
Absolutely.
And yes, Andrew, we'll always give a shout out to Randallsburg. He was thanking you for that.
One thing I think we would love to hear from all of you who are on this call today is, if there are roles that you see for your community, for your organization going forward, if there are next steps that you're already preparing to take that you want to put on our radar so that we can be ready to provide support for that.
It's a quiet group today.
It's Friday.
That is. Michael Volkos is saying that the update was very helpful and he appreciates it. And thank you, Michael, for everything you do, advocating for better houses and better communities, and your engagement with the Neighbors for More Neighbors initiative as well. So we'll definitely be in touch with you on that. All right. And we're getting a few requests for where we could give the presentation to, which absolutely, please reach out to us. Don't be shy. Especially in this virtual world, it's a lot easier to give presentations because we don't have to travel and can sometimes even do a couple a day just because of the convenience of doing it from home. And as Jennifer said, though, we're still stretched thin. And we're always looking for additional speakers. So if you're interested in helping us give the presentation, we have a pretty good template at this point with strong talking points. So making it as easy as possible for you to do that as well.
Well, if there aren't any more questions at this point, then, without further ado, I'll turn things over to William Murdoch. William, to close us out.
Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer and team, and good morning, everybody. Just to close things out, first, I want to thank all of you for being so engaged and for challenging us and asking us to do more. As you've seen in today's presentation and the strategy, this is something that MORPC is all in on and something that we're growing into. I don't think our team mentioned, even our executive committee is going to be looking at this as a strategic push here in the next month or two to see what else we can do to help local governments across the region. We're not the only ones in this. All of you are experts, and we want to work with you, and we want you to get value from what we're doing so that your efforts are easier. So we're really excited, and we're really humbled to be able to continue to work in this space. I think that what we're seeing today shows you that we can, even though the challenge seems a little bit daunting, just looking at the dashboard shows some of the challenges we face as a region. Even though it's a little bit daunting, I'm reassured, I'm excited because I see that everybody in this group is engaged and working together. And as you see, we're going to continue to support you, whether it's policy or development or residential services or advocacy or data. And we're going to continue to also use our work in government affairs to challenge the new administration in DC and new Congress and the new folks at the State House to keep this focus on our region and the things that we need for housing. So thank you again for being involved. Just a couple of small things to close out. I want to remind you that we're going to be having a lot more conversations as we get into the year. February 19th is the kickoff of our Regional Housing Strategy Series. Again, this is going to bring in folks from around the country to get us excited and to challenge our thinking on how we can do more innovative solutions to housing. It's one of the things that in all of our conversations in the last few months, we said we have a hunger for new solutions here. I will tell you too, for this series and the other series, if you see a speaker or you read about it in a magazine or a blog or on Twitter of somebody who's pushing the envelope on this, let us know and we'll go after them to try to get them plugged in as a speaker as part of our series. This year, our annual event for our organization is called State of the Region. It's virtual. And we're really excited to bring that focus to housing and better development as well. And our keynote speaker is about to be announced, and that's Jonathan Rose. If you're a planner, you just geeked out about it like I did. If you're not, what you need to know about Jonathan Rose is he's a planner, he's a real estate developer, he's an author. His communities have been recognized for doing the things we're trying to do here, affordability, sustainability, and we can't think of a better person, a better visionary to bring to challenge us with our State of the Region event. It's virtual this year, so we hope that you're able to join us for that. And then the last things, just to reiterate what everybody said, you know that where we're headed this year with our housing work, we're diving into it. We're going to continue to advocate it. One of the commitments that we're making is to make sure that in every corner of our agency's work, that we're highlighting housing, we're emphasizing housing and equity and how those things are so important, whether it's for development and growth of the region or for local governments to do what they need to do to help their businesses and residents through recovery. We want to continue to do that and bring that spotlight. And we're asking you to do the same. And I'm looking at the list of folks on this call. I know many of you do this every day as part of your career and your public service or your commitment. We're asking you to do a little bit more. And if this is something that you've got an opportunity to raise it in a public forum or in a meeting or in a project, housing needs, equity needs, this is really key, and we'll stand alongside you and support you as you do that. And so the last thing, I want to thank everybody for being engaged. If you are a project sponsor, thank you for continuing to support the regional housing strategy and getting us this far. Just being part of the advisory group is a way to support and challenge and further this work. And we just appreciate your time and energy and commitment to being involved in this. And with that, I also want to thank my team at MORPC. These folks are amazing and brilliant and passionate about what we do. And you see their names up there. They deserve a great amount of kudos for continuing to push this work, and I'm grateful for them. And I think with that, Kirsten and Jennifer, I think that's the meeting. We might be able to adjourn here and let you go a little bit early.
Yes, that's it. We'll give all of you the gift of time today.